Europe is headed down a very scary path right now. And I think a lot of the commitments to maintaining neoliberalism in a lot of the important EU nations is causing them even more harm. Where many people laugh about Viktor Orban and Hungary, right? They think a lot of people look at Viktor Orban in Europe. A lot of EU leaders look at Viktor Orban and say, oh, that's just one guy. He's just like different. Except I think a lot of Western European nations are going to be reflecting Hungarian style politics fairly soon. Right wing authoritarian fascists that maybe even play the both sides game, whether it be Russia or even dealing with China. The EU, would you say the EU is in worse shape than the US? I mean, the EU is definitely worse shape than the US. Yeah, every European Union country has their own version of Viktor Orban, and you're seeing more and more Viktor Orbans pop up everywhere. Respectfully, this is one of your worst takes to date. Really? You don't see the rise of far right movements, like openly, actively fascist movements, in every European Union country? Hasan doesn't understand Europe or Britain. EU frogs. I love you all, and I told you many years ago when you'd come in and laugh at America not having any social safety nets, I told you that it was coming. Okay? I told you that you are looking at your future. You are basically laughing at all of the stupid that we argue about here in America. You will argue about inevitably. Okay? The self-inflicted austerity in European countries was a self-inflicted wound that started a long time ago. It's not new. It's just finally getting to a point where people are sick and tired of the eviscerated social safety nets and are lashing out at whatever target they can in a very American fashion. And those targets are Muslims. Those targets are, whoever they think is the real enemy. It's never austerity. Meanwhile, in that process, as everyone is too busy fighting against immigrants and fighting against like Muslim refugees or whatever, the people in positions of power are maintaining their austerity regimes and simultaneously privatizing key sectors. When people say, Hasan, you don't understand UK politics or you don't understand European politics, I'm confused because what I see is virtually an identical process in the UK, for example, with the Reform Party. This is something I warned about in the immediate aftermath of the Labour victory. A right-wing, neoliberal Labour Party would inevitably make way for a growing fascist movement in the UK. And that is precisely what's happening. We've got a new government since 2 weeks, and it's nothing but austerity cuts with tougher immigration and increased defense budget. Our new defense minister is a huge Trump simp, same time and time again. That's why I'm saying, like, before you know it, your countries are going to be swept away by multiple Viktor Orbans. And I don't know why people personally think that that is not going to happen when it's already started to happen long before you recognized it. Hasan, I think you're not entirely wrong, but wrong on this. You're wrong on Germany. I hope so. You understand EU politics. EU libs are a little more left, so they watch your stream, but they're still libs. No, I know. Also, my biggest haters are European Social Democrats that love NATO. These are the guys that at least are like, you know what? I don't agree with him on NATO stuff, but overall, I still kind of agree with him, especially when he's ripping into America's lack of social safety nets. Look at French politics. Look at even German politics with the AfD in Germany. Italy already has Meloni. The right, the fascist right, is growing after many years of center right dominance and neoliberal dominance, and all the austerity that came alongside that. I think that it is inevitable. I literally joined a leftist Discord in Sweden today, and they saw that I followed you and called you evil and brain impaired. Then I was cooked for following you. Yeah. I mean, make no mistake, there's plenty of Democrats who also say I'm a fabulist. There's plenty of Democrats in the United States of America that fancy themselves to be progressive and simultaneously still simultaneously still talk about how the Democrats shouldn't be doing more. What do you mean? What's your expectation, Hasan? So there's, of course, going to be plenty of people who consider themselves to be leftists in Europe and in European countries who also feel that way in a similar vein. I am no fan, but reform are not Nazis. Racist, yes. Although they have a surprising number of people of color, it's why Farage distanced himself from Yaxley Lenin. The Second World War is still close to the British. I am no fan of the MAGA party, but they are no Nazis. Racist, yes. Although they have a surprising number of people of color. That's why Donald Trump does not openly and actively say the Proud Boys are great and he loves them. He just tells them to stand back and stand by. Like, that's crazy. How do you not recognize that you are basically normalizing fascist politics and you're falling for the optics argument? Yeah, sure. There's black people and brown people in these parties as well. But the party is united on their anti-migrant agenda. I disagree. The inverse is just as likely because Trump is seen as a liability to the capital and threatens stability for garnering more wealth. Also, Trump has literally caused big inverse reactions. Leftists may not have the institutions, but the ground movements are growing. We have to be optimistic, or what else do we have? Also, is dialectics. I mean, sure, they know leftists care a lot about you, so talking shit about you is an easy, accessible, and apolitical way of challenging left-wing politics in a way. They hurt you to hurt us. I mean, I'm not a representative of anything. I'm just a Twitch streamer, but I'm not sure sarcasm is the best way to approach people who find Nazi parties trustworthy. Okay, what am I supposed to do? I'm just using an analog for them to understand by pointing to a guy that they probably recognize as a fascist, Donald Trump. It's just basically fascism normalization at that point. When you're like, oh, dude, the Reform Party is different. Like, they're comprised maybe half of the former EDL movement enjoyers, you know? And I get that. I get that interest. I get the very valid reasons as to why people personally don't want to recognize how dire the situation is. I totally understand that, because you don't want to believe that the country that you're a part of has a very active and very valid fascist movement. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see your fellow neighbors and your fellow citizens as like monsters that you read in history books, but that's how it works. Respectfully, though, your takes are very negative without a sense of hope. People don't respond well when you dog on their countries without providing a contrary narrative as to how their country could improve. I mean, it's the same thing I do here in the United States of America. I don't know what to tell you. In Norway, our Communist Party may be co-leading with the Labour Party to gain majority, and I just hope that's a good sign. I've heard things about the majority Socialist Party in Norway that aren't too great. Like, not the actual Socialist Party, but the one that is currently leading the polls is not like a real. It seems like it's like a regular pro-business social democratic party. Yeah, the Arbeiderpartiet, the Workers' Party. Anyway, I still think you're simplifying. EU politics, sure, UK and Germany might also have growing Nazi movements. The far-right support are actually going down in a lot of European countries, so your analysis is a little shallow. We'll see, man. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong, except I'm not wrong in, as you admitted, in England, nor am I wrong in Germany. They've only seen growth in a matter of a very short period of time as well. Maybe there's a counterexample that I can't think of right now, but I can't think of a single counterexample. Russia, the most important country in the EU, is going towards fascism, but Europe is not. Yeah, I know. That's the other part of the story, is that when Germany falls, it's over. You are wrong in Germany. I get the general sentiment, but it's not like Europe will be a carbon copy of Hungary or the US. That's just not true. But of course, the situation is dire as f. You were wrong in Germany, not entirely, but still wrong. It's not going to go fascist. Yeah, you're not actually providing me a reasonable counter. You're just simply saying it can't happen here, which is understandable. I also understand that feeling where you go, it can't happen here. We can't have mass detention facilities and try to go after virtually every undocumented migrant. It can't happen here. Well, Donald Trump's president again. A lot of the things that you think can't happen here end up happening here. It ends up happening there too. Look at the polls. Look at what's happening here in the last 2 weeks. You don't understand. We'll see. The left in Finland is fighting back after their rightist party won the past elections. People are not liking the austerity over there. That's the only thing that can hopefully fix the situation. Polls just show AFD growing for the past 3 months. Yeah. AFD back in May at their lowest point has swung up to 22%. And as far as I understand, the CDU, CSU is also like going more and more right wing. I mean, they're already right, but they're moving away from center right politics to more right wing politics. Like that's what usually happens. I mean, look at the Democratic Party. It is a almost perfect analog where the Democratic Party capitulates to a lot of the sentiment coming from the far right, coming from the Republican Party. Look at our last election where the Democrats basically took on an anti-immigrant sentiment, an anti-immigrant narrative. They got comstered for it. The center-right neoliberal parties end up adopting the positions of the far-right parties or the far-right positions from basically 4 years ago with hopes that they can retain their status. It's the same with Labor in the UK. It's the same with the Democratic Party in America. And it's the same with CDU in Germany. Democrats lost because they tried to run a woman. Americans are sexist, racist. Yeah, no, that's not the case. The more center-right parties capitulate to far-right positions on immigration, okay, while simultaneously maintaining an austerity regime and not fixing the social safety nets and improving material conditions for the existing labor force in the country, the more the public goes, okay, so I guess like these are the anti-immigrant guys. Why the should I go with this party now? I'm going to go with the anti-immigrant guys who have been right about immigration all along. That's just how it works. It makes sense if you're not paying a lot of close attention to politics in general. And many people don't. Yeah. Also, reform is on top of the charts right now. Like something that I warned about in the immediate aftermath of the predictable labor victory. I said that this would be a massive issue, and it's already occurring. The multi-party systems allow for smaller far-right groups to grow quickly as the extreme side of conservatism, like an escape. Yeah, reform is a rebrand of UKIP. That was a rebrand of BNP. Growing quickly is easy to do from nothing to a few seats, but they will never directly rule. Yeah, they will never directly rule until they are the ruling party. That's usually how it works. It also rarely ever goes in the opposite direction. It never goes for like communist parties growing. I wonder why. Perhaps because the parties that are in power, neoliberal parties, fear and refuse to cave or capitulate to left-wing parties out of the fear that leftist parties, communist parties, socialist parties are far more disruptive to the pre-existing hierarchy where big business still thrives than the Nazi parties are, than the fascist parties are. It is who the domineering parties cave to that actually stand to win the most. And if they consistently cave and consistently capitulate to the far-right parties, then people go, okay, well, these guys, we want to shake things up. The system is in a dire situation. Okay? The system is fundamentally broken. We want someone to shake things up. These guys have basically been signaling to the broader population that the far-right parties are correct on their attitude towards immigration. So maybe we'll go there. Like, you know what this reminds me of? The huge demonstrations in Berlin. The anti-AFD demonstrations in Berlin. You know what this reminds me of? Women's March 2016. Look where that got us.
50,000 people have gathered in Berlin to call on Germany's other political parties not to cooperate with the...
Like, we did this too, chatter. That's why I'm saying Europe is just basically following America's footsteps, just like almost a decade later. Okay? You are so wrong, Lamau. It's hilarious. I wrote to you on Discord a week ago offering German perspective, but I get that there's a lot of shit going on in the U.S. right now. We have more than the Democratic Party. I get that you are angry about that, but many countries here do not have a two-party system. Okay. Western liberal democracies that have a multi-party structure still inevitably go back to the same left-right dynamics by building coalitions. Okay. I understand that this creates an additional safeguard, right? So it's not just like either you're all in on the Democrats or all in on the Republicans. And yet, when the party that is the dominating party is considering socialist and communist parties to be a non-starter, then they inevitably create that left-right coalition on the boundaries of, at the very most, a far-right neoliberal administration, or a far-right or very right-wing, much more right-wing neoliberal administration that inevitably makes way for the far-right to come in and actually, quote-unquote, change the system, change the dynamic. That's it. Having multiple parties simply forces the hand of the government to create a governing coalition. Also, we had a little thing called the Holocaust that changed our dynamic. I know, that's why it's even scarier that after the Holocaust, Germany is still entertaining fascism with 22% popularity. That's insane. That makes it way more insane. That's the point. Also, I mean, look at the current governing parties and the way that they rage bait. What do you mean? That's not rage bait. Look at the current governing parties in Germany and how they've dealt with the issue of popular mobilization against the unlimited loyalty to Israel. This is just a loop until we actually get stuck with fascists. Uninspiring centrists refuse to tackle the underlying social problems that lead to the rise of the far right. Stagnating living standards creates fertile ground for fascism. Far right win elections. Far right drives the economy off a cliff, lowers standards of public life, and generally makes everything objectively worse. Uninspiring centrist defeats the far right with a promise of change. And then, boom, back to uninspiring centrist refuses to tackle underlying social problems that lead to the rise of the far right. The thing that this actually does not mention, this cycle does not mention, is that there is a nefarious purpose for this song and dance. And that nefarious purpose is to undermine the existing welfare state slowly but surely, and then privatize as profit, as areas that you can eke out profits become smaller and smaller. You inevitably look to pre-existing publicly controlled sectors to eat away from, and you can't go in and destroy it overnight. That would cause a lot of anger and resentment towards the government. There would be a popular uprising. So what you have to do is, for decades and decades and decades, undermine the social safety nets that causes this resentment and anger to begin with, okay? And then slowly but surely privatize those social safety nets, the government-funded programs, transportation, healthcare, education. It can't happen overnight. People obviously care about these programs. It's just like in America, what do we have in terms of social safety nets? What do we have? Social Security. The Republicans have fantasized about gutting Social Security for literally a century, since its inception. Okay? They can't do it immediately. They can't do it overnight. They can simply cripple it for years and years and years and years until it gets to a point where you're like, well, it's bankrupt. We gotta pick it apart. Social Security is like the last bastion of competent social safety nets here in the United States. Look at what the current Republican administration is doing while they're cutting, while they're doing fiscal austerity, while they're doing fiscal responsibility politics. They're cutting food stamps. That's what they're doing. Social Security and the existing government-funded healthcare is next. Recently, the CDU worked together with the AfD, and that's why the people are protesting. So this chatter saying it won't happen in Germany, like in the U.S., is just wrong. Yeah, they're stealing funds from FEMA at a time when climate change is ripping through the United States of America.